You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your hosts, Thomas Ahrens and Jared Mounts. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester, Virginia.
If that doesn't get you jacked up, I don't know what will.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Fishing the DMV. I'm your host, Thomas Ahrens, and we have the winner of stop number 5 on the Potomac River of the Northern Virginia Kayak Association, John Muhus. John, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. How you doing this morning, Tom?
I can't complain. Better than I deserve. I'm so glad I got you on the show. For my listeners that are here every week, I usually try to get everybody on the Northern Virginia Kayak Association. The local tournaments we're trying to start doing next year as we get, I get more staffing here to help me out with just logistics of it. But this is a really cool one. It's going to teach guys how to fish, hopefully how to do well on grassy tidal rivers in the heat of the summer. It's a really hard time to fish, but it can be very successful too. But first, John, like what kind of got you into the sport of kayak fishing and bass fishing in general?
So I really haven't been fishing all that long. I started about 5 years ago. I think it was in 2017. About this time of year in August, I went on a camping trip with my sister and my wife at the time. And I just decided it was one of those free fishing weekends that the state of Virginia does, where you don't have to buy a license and you can go out
Cool.
and you can just have a little fun maybe. So we went camping and I borrowed a rod from my father-in-law and I was going to go and fish a little bit. When we got there, we realized the campground rented kayaks, and we decided, the first day we were out there, we were going to rent a kayak. And I went out and I took my rod out there. And when I went to the little store where you rent the kayaks, I actually saw this yellow and red crappie jig. And I was like, I'm going to buy that. And I'm going to go out there and I'm going to throw it. And I went out and I was throwing it out and I was casting and reeling really, really fast. And I didn't know anything. I didn't know what I was doing. Somehow I caught multiple fish, multiple like bluegill. I caught a decent bass. I mean, it was my first bass that I had pretty much ever caught. And I swear it was huge, but honestly, now that I've caught, thousands of fish, it was probably just like a 2-pounder. So
It's that one, you know what I mean? It's that one fish that just gets you hooked and gets you addicted.
yeah. But I also caught catfish, which was the interesting one because I had no idea how to handle them. And I'm trying to unhook that thing, and it did its little wiggle, and it put its barb right into my hand right here. And that was my first day on a kayak fishing in general in my life, basically out by myself as an adult. I went a little bit as a kid with my dad doing the whole worm bobber thing, trying to have some fun catching bluegill. But that was what got me hooked. I mean, almost quite literally with the catfish. And I had to paddle back with that catfish. And those things sting when they go in there. I don't know if it's the slime on their barbs, but they don't feel good when you get punctured in the hand.
Catfish are a pain in the ass, and especially to me, it's the smaller ones. The bigger ones, like the bigger they are, I mean, you can deal with them a little bit better. But those smaller ones are just a pain in the ass to deal with.
Yeah, for sure. But after that, I immediately when we got back from that trip, I went home, started watching YouTube videos on kayak fishing and I started getting really into it, and then went out and bought my first kayak. Was a Lifetime Tamarack angler, the little 10-footer. And everybody who fishes the club saw me in it all the next year because I immediately was really cocky and went out and started fishing kayak tournaments the next year. I hadn't even had a full year of fishing underneath me. I started in August of 17, and I fished my first tournament, and I think it was either February or March. I can't remember when it was, but it was on Germantown Lake, and I went out, and everybody struggled because it was early in the season, so not many people caught fish in that tournament, but I was one of them that caught one fish, and I got in the top 10 in the tournament, in my first tournament, because I caught one fish. And I've been doing it ever since. I've been hooked, man.
Dude, that's freaking awesome. Where's Germantown Lake?
Oh, Crockett Park. You know where Crockett Park, Germantown Lake is?
No idea where that is. That is so
It's
cool.
it's out in Bealton, Virginia. It's like the Warrenton Bealton area.
Okay, I know Warrenton, like Brittle area.
Yeah, it's a little further south, closer to Fredericksburg if you're at Brittle.
I'm gonna write that down. That is so cool. And that's one thing I love about this organization, kayak fishing in general, is like you get to fish places that you don't fish big bass boat tournaments, which is so freaking cool to explore new water.
Yeah, yeah. That tournament we didn't have back then. NVKBA didn't have as many members as it does now, so there weren't as many people fishing the tournament. Now there's no way this club could be on Crockett
Mhm.
Park. It's too small. I think it's only like 77 acres.
Oh, that is
So
small.
it's not, yeah, it's not a big lake at all. But there's big fish, and most of the people in here know me. Like that first year, I kind of got a name for myself for fishing that place because I won the that was my first year tournament win. Was I won a month long tournament, and I was fishing that lake. I was just throwing top water, and I was fishing the grass in there, and I caught a citation. My first citation came out of that lake.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that was it. And then my first year of fishing too. It was I was pretty lucky that first year. It was a lot of fun.
What was the biggest learning curve for you? Like, I mean, you're not one of these like good old boys that have been fishing since they were like 4. And so to go from not fishing at all to, and we're gonna get into this, like you went to a national championship, you're in the running for Angler of the Year points. Like that's freaking impressive. That's really impressive.
Yeah, biggest learning curve. Shoot, I still struggle fishing deep. Honestly, I I am a power fisherman when it comes to the definition. I like fishing shallow. I like fishing grass. I like fishing wood. I mean, if I can stay less than 10 feet, it'd be great. But I mean, I do go out a little bit and I fish a little deeper than 10 feet, but I can't do much no more than that. Still to this day, I'm not great at it, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, it's something that especially now, like it's so weird. Do you specialize in shallow or do you go deep? Because there are guys that can make a name for themselves now, especially with Panoptics and everyone's now out deep. It almost opens up the bank for some individuals.
Yeah, I will fish deep. It depends on the body of water. Like the res, you're gonna have to go deep here on this next tournament on the classic. There's a little bit where you have to, especially like Lake Anna, that you got to fish deep. Yeah, I mean, the big
Yeah.
bodies of water like that, you'll have to. You have to get out there and you got to throw a shaky head. You got to throw something like that. But if I can fish shallow, if they're biting shallow, I'm gonna do it because that is what I'm best at. You know, everybody says fish your strengths. I'm best at fishing shallow. So if I can get away with fishing grass or fishing shallow timber, then that's what I'm going to do.
What are you running this year? Are you running the same kayak you did your first year at the club?
No, no, I've upgraded since. That was I fished the Tamarack for like that full year, and I actually finished fourth in the standings for Angler of the Year that year,
Dude, awesome.
and that got me eligible to fish the national championship the next year. So that year, somebody actually let me borrow a kayak because I still had that Tamarack, and they were like, "We're not letting you take that cheap kayak down to the national championship." I really wanted to because I was like, "Man, I'm going to beat all these guys in this cheap kayak," you know, to say that I was all cocky. But I actually borrowed a kayak, from a pedal kayak, from a guy that was fishing in the club back then. But now I have that year I upgraded to a bona fide, and I still have my bona fide SS 127.
Now you got it pimped out with the trolling motor, Panoptics, and everything
No
yet?
trolling
Or
motor. I'm a paddle guy, man. I
dude,
uh I
your
go
lats
against all these
massive.
guys with these motors and they're blowing past me and I'm like, you know what? All right, I'll just go slow and I'll just fish my I usually like I said, I'm usually fishing shallow. It's tough for me to get out deep with the paddle as well. I think if I had a motor I might be able to fish out there a little better, but I still paddle and I'm still that's why I like getting back in the creeks and getting shallow. I think is because I can get back there and it's not as hard for me to hold position on certain spots.
Well, so when you look at a guy like John Cox, the nice thing about that is if you don't have like electronics on your boat, you don't have to worry about fishing deep. Like if you force yourself in that sense where you don't have that technology, you don't have the ability to like cover water, it does force you to pick apart an area, stay shallow. And it really almost, I think it gives you peace of mind as an angler. Like I don't have to worry about fishing deep because I physically can't or whatever. So I'm just going to keep doing what I do best.
Yeah, I have upgraded. I have electronics now. I have the Humminbird Helix 7 with the side imaging at this point.
Nice.
So I do see a little bit of what's down there. I started out with one of those Garmin Strikers. That
Hmm.
it was just basically a water temp and a depth. I mean, those things they do tell you a little bit, but I never really got good at reading the fish off of that just because I don't think it's very clear on what's down there on those kind of units. The strike or not the helix that I have now with the sign imaging, it is really helpful. I can see a lot more. You can cover a lot more water and you can find the brush and the stuff that's down there. And it makes it a little easier to fish down deep.
How important was that? And if you guys don't know at home, after we're through 5 events right now, we have the big end of year championship coming up in October. You're right now, as you said before the show, you're about third in points, right?
I was third before this tournament. We're not sure where I'm gonna end up after this win. I should be up there near the top. It's gonna be really close between me and two other guys. But
So yeah, so you're up there in the top three. How important was electronics through this year for you, or did it play at all a factor?
it helped. The Anthem tournament it helped definitely. Uh, I would say the Five Lakes tournament it helped me out there as well. I was able to spot the timber and stuff that where I could. That was because I was catching fish on trees on in that tournament, and I fish a swim jig a lot. That's my go-to bait, and I was fishing a swim jig there, and I was throwing it down deep into those trees where the fish were. And same thing on this tournament as well. I was fishing a swim jig, and I was fishing more of a. It was a swim bait with just a weighted head on there, open hook and everything. It was just a standard Kitech on the back of it. But it once again that helped me get down. It was docks on that tournament. To be honest, it was more than timber on that one. So
So,
it helps you see them underneath there. The side imaging does for sure on the dock.
then let's paint the story then, like, because it sounds like you have a real good chance of actually solidifying. Knock on wood. I'm not going to say it, but this year might be one where you take home more hardware. Tournament one of the year, Potomac River. What did you think of that tournament going into it, then afterwards? And we're just going to do quick little like snippets of each tournament that leads up to this big event.
Okay, tournament one, I'm always pretty confident on the river on Potomac because of the fish that I go for are in the creek, and they get up in there after the winter, and then they stay there all year. Basically, there's resident fish in the creek that I fish, and they had gotten back there, but they weren't biting quite yet. So they were out that tournament. They were out towards about the mouth of the creek. They hadn't moved all the way back, or they were trying to move all the way back, and then basically we would get a cold spell, and they would move back out to the little bit of deeper water. So I knew where they were. I ended up doing okay. I fished the NVKBA tournament and the KBF tournament for that one because it was the dual one. First day I finished, I think it was 11th in the KBF tournament, and then the second day I think I finished 12th in the KBF tournament. And overall, it was the NVKBA was the 2 day. You had your best five. I think I was right around 10th or 11th. So it wasn't bad, but it wasn't great for me. I wasn't too happy about it.
So that kicks us off to Lake Anna. And so one tournament in your belt, I don't think you really think too much about the point standings, but after Lake Anna, where were you sitting in the points and going into that tournament? What was your feeling? Because that's more
Late
of a deep water thing, like you said.
Yeah, it's more of a deep water thing, but I was able to get on them shallow around the docks or right at the edge of the docks at Lake Anna. So I think I finished in like fifth place on the Lake Anna tournament or
Did you,
Lake Anna tournament,
did you fish north?
fourth or fifth.
You fished the northern part, didn't you?
It was yeah, I'm closer to I'm around the state park usually when I fish
Okay.
Lake Anna.
I
That's
thought I saw you out there on the water on that one, but yeah.
but yeah, I was able to get on them. Uh, the Lake Ann tournament, I lost one that would have put me up near the top, which I was a little upset about. But I did pretty well. A lot of people struggled in that tournament too, if I remember correctly. It was
Yeah.
hard to catch fish that day, and I think I only caught six, so it wasn't like I was on them that day.
It was funky. It was really a funky bite. I finally got to that tournament and that was a real funky bite there.
Hmm.
But then you go to the river. And so where are you in the points now after two events?
After two, I'm not 100% sure. I was up. I've been up there around the top 5 to 10 all year, and then after the Five Lakes tournament, that's when I jumped up into the top five. So after two, I think I was somewhere between 5 and 10. Honestly, I can't remember exactly where I was. But then we
And
moved to the Shenandoah, and I was on fish. But everybody was kind of on fish. They were on like small fish in that tournament, and I was on a lot of small fish. I had one fish denied because of hand placement that would have moved me into the top 10,
oh
which
wow.
was my own fault. I put my hand in the wrong spot and it covered up the back fins on there. I had it on there because those smallmouth, man, they don't like sitting on that
Oh my god.
board. They're flopping all over the place. Usually when I take pictures of my fish, I'll take one with my hand on there and then I take one with the fish just on there. So I'm not even touching the fish at all. I just leave it on there and it's laying there perfectly, so I don't get in any trouble for where my hand is and touching it. But those smallmouth, they wouldn't sit still for me, so I had to keep my hand on there, and I got I got dinged for one fish that would have moved me into the top 10 on that tournament.
And that was the biggest learning curve for me is trying to land smallmouth in a kayak on a crankbait. And it's just like, good God.
That's what I was killing them on the Shenandoah was a crankbait.
Yeah.
I had a little square bill in there.
And it's like, how do I not get impaled on these damn things and then also get them around the net? Because it's just, I tried to get them on something else just because of the treble hook situation. I was like, could you please eat something else? But it was the crankbait.
Yeah, yeah, it was
And
a crankbait for me too. And yeah, those treble hooks, they're horrible. I've actually been hooked once before, but that was a monster fish down on the Chick one time.
oh,
But
really?
yeah, I was fishing a big swim bait. I like to fish the big stuff, like the
Yeah.
6 inch and plus stuff. And I went to go net this guy. It's like a 7 pounder basically, and I reached down with my net the first time, and he did a run. He took off, and I dropped the net in the water. So I went down the second time when I got it back up to the boat, and I grabbed him. And when I grabbed him, the fish went shoot shoot, and it just put that hook right in here into my thumb, and it was deep. It was all the way down to the bend on one of these big swim bait treble hooks, and I had to sit there while that fish is thrashing around with the hook.
Mm.
It did not feel good.
Dude, that is like my biggest fear is to get hooked with a treble hook and the fish is still attached.
Yeah,
God, that sucks.
and it was a big girl too. So it was a 7 pounder, and she wasn't happy that I had her in my hand.
Did you actually get it in the boat or did you just like
Oh
screw
yeah,
the
I had it in the boat. It was actually in a tournament as well.
holy shit.
I was in a swim bait tournament. That's why I was fishing the big ones.
Okay.
But yeah, I had to unhook the fish, and then I yanked it. I just pulled it myself. I was by myself for this thing, so I yanked it right out of there, and it bled for a little while, but then I got the fish scored, and it actually got me I won a swim bait because of that fish. It helped me with my weight. Yeah, it was a weight
So
tournament.
cool.
I don't know
Yeah.
if you've ever done a kayak weight tournament, but
Mhm.
it's not fun to try to have try to you have to pick the fish up and hold the fish up with the scale like this, and then
Yeah.
show the scale on the camera. So
Dude, that's
it's
freaking
interesting
awesome.
trying to do that on a kayak.
Yeah, like that was the thing too. So this is my first year converting over from, boat tournaments to kayak. I got to fish 2 this year with my schedule. The landing situation, the positioning, there's so much shit that's different than fishing out of a boat. It's completely different.
It's it's interesting. I've never actually been on a bass boat or a John boat. I've never fished out of one. I've only ever fished from the bank a little bit just for fun, and then out of my kayak. That's it. I only have experience in a kayak. That's all I know. So that's what I do. I don't own a bass boat. I don't own a John boat, and I've never even been on one with a friend or anything.
I bet that helps you out a lot because you were just learning, especially since you're a newer angler, you just learned just straight off that way of fishing, that way of living. You don't have to so example is like when I talked about the smallmouth thing, if you hook one with treble hooks on a boat, you can play it a lot easier, especially when I was using a lot lighter line. It's a lot easier to play it. How you use the net, all that stuff comes into play. When you're a kayak, it is different. It is completely different. And I know I lost a ton of fish in the tournament because I didn't understand the subtle nuances of that. And this is just one example. But you don't have that learning curve of trying to switch your brain about how you pre-fish, how you rig, everything. You just know this one way. And that's got to be a huge help compared to other people that are trying to make the switch.
Yeah, I would assume so. I wouldn't know, but
Mhm.
if you say, then yeah, I would assume it would be a big help to not have to try to relearn what you're doing.
How do you how okay, what is your style for netting? Like how do you do that?
Um, I I'm a right-handed cast, left-handed reel guy,
Okay.
so I'm always bringing it around to the left side of my boat, and then I reach down with my left hand. So I got the rod in my right hand, and I'll bring it around so I always bring my fish to the left side of the boat if possible. I mean, there's certain instances where where you can't because of boat positioning and the fish just doesn't want to cooperate. But if I can steer that fish over to my left, I always do it that way because that way I can guide it. I can put the rod tip over this way basically, and I can reach down with my left hand and get it.
Gotcha, gotcha, gotcha. Ah, that's a good tip, especially guys for you guys at home. Please take notes on that. So you get through the river tournament. At this point, you got 2 tournaments left. Are you feeling pretty confident, especially with the Battle of the Five Lakes, that okay, I can make a run at this thing, or when did you really feel that?
Yeah, I'm so I did well with the 5 lakes last year. So I was pretty confident going into that one as well. Um, Once again, I did pretty well there. I was fishing my swim jig in the trees, in the timber and stuff on a hunting run. That's where I went on that lake, and I caught a good amount of fish. I caught some decent fish in that tournament, and I think I was like sixth or seventh in the standings on that tournament. So I got another top 10, so more Angler of the Year points. I'm doing pretty well this year. My goal for this year was honestly, I haven't had this happen yet in the 4 to 5 years that I've been fishing, was catch a limit in every single tournament this year. I've always had one tournament where I struggled really bad. It was last year. It was Lake Anna. I caught one fish there, and I it was beginning of the year, and I really struggled in the spring for some reason. I couldn't catch them. This year I have caught a limit so far. Let's cross the fingers because we still got the classic. But I've caught a limit in every single tournament, and I've been right around the top 10. I think I have one or two finishes where I'm 11th or 12th, but every single tournament I'm either in the top 10, top five a couple of times, or I'm right at the top 10.
So I have this hypothesis, and this is a lot of people when you're taught, especially I fished junior bass, I fished, or it was middle school bass fishing club, high school bass fishing club, college, and they always tell you, you fish to win, you fish to win. And I am under the belief that's one way of doing it, but that's like trying to be a home run hitter and you say, I'm going to swing for the fence versus being a guy that says, like, I just want to put the ball in play consistently. Because all of a sudden at the end of the year, if you're the guy that says, like, I'm just trying to put the ball in play every year, boom, your stats are going to look great. I love your mindset there because I talk to so many guys who are like, well, I'm trying to fish to win. And like, I'm trying to catch the biggest five or whatever. But your approach, like, I just want to catch five keepers. eh, I like that mindset because I feel like that gets you in the right headspace where, yeah, that's doable. You can tell yourself that's doable. It's hard to say, like, I'm going to catch 25 pounds each tournament.
Yeah, I mean, I do go for my big fish. I do throw these swim baits during the tournaments. I'll throw these big swim baits, but usually I hold off on that until I have my five because big swim baits they're hit or miss. But if
Yeah.
they're on them, they're on them, and you can catch giant fish on those things. You can catch little fish too, but usually I'm going for my five. That because when you get five, especially in the NVKBA club tournaments, you're up there. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people that struggle to catch five fish off a kayak, whether it's conditions for that day, depending on the day, and everybody could be on them. But most of the time, when you catch your five fish, you're in top 10 area. You're close to the top, and then once I get my five, then I start really thinking about catching bigger fish. I start targeting those big fish basically.
I really like that. And people listening, you got to take note to that is especially when I talk and I do little seminars with the high school anglers, they're always trying to just, they're swinging for the fence right off the gate. That is one strategy, but I challenge you, if you're the guy that just bats for average, like my first goal is get five. Some days, you're not going to get those big fives. Like on my third monitor, I have Bassmaster Live on. And Brandon Polnick talked about that, about just limiting every day because that one extra fish through a season could make or break it. It really can.
Mhm.
Versus a guy that does, he's like, I'm just going to lock a jig in my hand all year. Yeah, you might win a tournament, but then you might finish like 250th the rest of the time. So thinking about being consistent and having a consistent mindset, I really think will help you out in the sport. Or, that's just my hypothesis anyway.
Yeah, I've been close in Angler of the Year. That was another one of my goals was to try to win Angler of the Year this year. So far, I finished my first year was I finished fourth. My second year, I finished second in Angler of the Year, and then third year, I believe it was fifth. So I fell back. I kind of went backwards, and then now this year I'm getting close. So we'll see how it goes on the classic. It always comes down to the classic for some reason. It's there's everybody's kind of close in the standings every year, so that classic really determines on who wins. And that's when I would finish second, I lost it in the classic. It was me and another guy that used to fish these tournaments. It was Brian Dillon. He was We were right there neck and neck going into the last tournament. And I believe he won that tournament and he won the Angler of the Year because of it.
And so we're going to get to the classic here in a minute, and now that we went through the whole season. We went from tournament one, we went to the Battle of Five Lakes, and now we're at the big one. Going into it, and this is why I like to talk to everyone that's won tournaments that come on the show. Your thought process, your strategy before the tournament, before the cast one, what went into that in the decisions that you made? And then, like in any battle, your plans just go up until you meet the enemy and you get punched in the face and you have to make decisions and changes. So before the tournament, what was your strategy going into it? Was it the same strategy you eventually would use?
Yeah, Potomac River is all about tide. It's all about tide, and the
Spoiler,
fish.
guy.
Yeah, the fish position because of the tide. So whenever I fish there, that determines where I start and where I go fishing, basically. So the tide in this one, we were going to start on an incoming tide. I think it was about halfway into the incoming tide, and then it was going to switch right in the middle of the tournament, and the tide was going to start flowing out. So there's a spot in the creek that I like to fish where they go and they move up underneath the bushes on the sides of the creek, basically, when the tide is coming in. So they get up underneath those bushes, and you have a small window where they're up there on the banks and they're sitting underneath the bushes, and you can get a bait underneath those bushes, basically, and you'll catch a lot of fish doing that. So if you can skip, like I skip my swim jig, or I'll just pitch my swim jig over to the bushes, and I just let it fall, and then bounce it a couple times, and if they don't bite it immediately on the fall, then once I start reeling it back a little bit, they'll grab it. They'll come out and they'll grab it.
How do you
So
like
that
to
was
re
my initial strategy, was to get back into there, and then coming out on the tide going out, all of the fish at the mouth of the creek, they'll move out from those lily pads because the water basically disappears in the lily pads, and they'll move into the holes if you know where the holes are in the creek. So I planned on starting way back into the creek and then moving out and fishing the holes out when the tide started to fall. And everything went perfect, to tell you the truth. I caught a ton of fish. It was that I didn't really change from my strategy. My strategy was sound, and I've done it a lot, so it worked. I caught a lot of fish this tournament.
So what did you use? What'd you catch them on?
Swim jig mostly. About 90% of my fish came on the swim jig. Swim jig with a kayak on the back, just a regular Strike King swim jig, 3/8 ounce, looked like a shad, like that silver white color, basically.
You fishing it on a 20-pound braid, 8-pound test? Like, what's your setup for that bad boy?
I'm every single one of my rods. I have braid to leader,
Ooh, okay.
and I I switch the size of the leader depending on the rod. This one I had I think it's 50-pound braid, and then I put a 15-pound fluorocarbon leader on my swim jig.
What kind of knot you use?
FG, FG for
Oh, okay.
yeah. I tie those things on the kayak too.
Dude, that's impressive. That's really
It's interesting trying to do it. I'll lay the rod out in front of me and keep tension on the one side, and then put the line in my mouth, and I'll pull like this, and I'll just tie it right in front of me everything's on the kayak. It's interesting to do, especially if there's wind and you're blowing around. It gets a little tough, but
How did you so I love the FG. I absolutely love it, but when I talk to old timers, they're like, "No, that's stupid. You don't need to use that." Like, what got you hooked on fishing the FG knot?
it comes through my guides really well, and it's strong. As long as you tie it correctly and you know how to tie it's strong. And I usually put long leaders on there. I'll put, you know, 20 20 yards of fluorocarbon on there, just because I don't like tying the FG a lot.
Mhm.
And I'm lazy. So as long as you tie one good FG, that'll stay on there for a little while. I mean, I retie them before every tournament, and I'll put a new leader on before every tournament, but I don't do it for every time I go fun fishing. So I'll use that leader for a little while until I feel like the line is going bad.
Okay. So I mean, walk us through tournament, you launch. Is it like immediate that you actually get onto them? Was it more of a late bite? Was it all day? When did you catch your first one? Was it within
Um,
minutes of starting or
my first bite of the day was actually the biggest fish of the day.
it's a
I
good way to start it.
I pitched up into a little spot where there was a bush. Like I said, it bit. I saw the line take off to the left, and I set the hook, and I immediately knew it was a big one. It's pulling straight down. I get it up, and my swim jig comes flying out of its mouth.
Oh god.
And I look at my swim. I'm baffled. I'm like, I don't know what went wrong. I look at my swim jig, and the hook had gone. Boop, and
Oh,
it actually bent the hook out on my swim jig. I had to drag all the way down, but it was a light wire swim jig. So after that I loosened up my drag a little bit, so I didn't do that anymore.
how
But
big?
yeah, he
How big do you think it was?
I don't. It's always a guess when that, but 18 or 19 incher year, probably.
Yeah.
I don't. I honestly, I don't know because I didn't get it in the boat. But yeah,
If it bends a hook out, I mean, oof.
yeah, it bent the hook out. So
Yeah.
I was very depressed immediately into the tournament. I mean, that was probably 15 minutes into the tournament.
How did you recover mentally? Because I think like a lot of anglers, we all have it in a tournament where we do lose a nice one. I lost a 5.5 pounder at Lake Anna, and it burnt me out because it just spun me out when I lost him by the boat.
I
I
was I
what
was
what'd you do?
down for a little while until I caught my next fish. But immediately I said, "Okay, you're doing the right thing. That sucks, basically, but move on to the next fish." I mean, it just I was like, "All right, they're biting what you're throwing. You're on them already. Just keep fishing. You'll catch some more." And that's the basically. I have lost a lot of fish in tournaments, so at this point, when you do lose them, and you're going to lose them, you're not going to catch every fish that you hook. You try not to lose them. You try to have a clean tournament. But another goal I like to have going into tournaments is try to fish clean. You know, don't lose fish. Don't make mental mistakes. Don't make mistakes that you can prevent, basically. But that one, I just had to loosen the drag a little bit, and I got that one in the boat, I think. But that I learned, I loosened it up, and I caught all the rest of the fish basically that day. Um,
So then after that 15 minutes of really sulking a little bit,
of
getting
beating
yourself back.
myself up.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Saying you're gonna quit the sport and everything else. When did you catch your first keeper then to calm you down? Was it
Actually, this one was a crazy one. It was a 15.5 inch fish, and I skipped my jig up underneath a bush, and
same
on
area? Same
the yeah,
area-ish?
yeah, I didn't
Lost one?
fish this whole area that I fished is a creek. It's probably I don't know the main area that I was catching the first stuff. I mean, the whole creek is probably 1,000 yards. I didn't move very far.
So
Basically.
basically, you're in the juice, you lose one, you take some time to calm yourself down, and then you go back fishing the same stretch, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
I this is probably 50 yards up the creek
gotcha.
that I caught my next one. Um, I skipped the jig up underneath the bush, and it bounced off the water, and it wrapped around a branch, and it
Oh,
was sitting there, and it had wrapped around this branch, and it was dangling from the branch, and the tail of the swim jig was sitting there in the water, and I was jerking on it, trying to get it off there, like we all do, you know. And while I'm doing that, the swim jig is just thrashing around, and a fish comes out of nowhere and just annihilates it.
no way.
Annihilates it while it's just hanging there. I'm freaking out because the line is still attached to the branch, and the fish is fighting the branch. And it's just fighting and fighting and fighting. I get over there as fast as I can, and I just shoved my net down underneath everything, and I picked the fish up with the branch and everything, and I just reached in there and I broke the branch. It was just a little branch, so I just broke it off, and I brought the branch, the fish, and everything back in
Oh my
the boat.
god, dude. Oh god. And you had 15-pound test, you said? Like,
Yeah,
you didn't
15
have
pound test. What's that?
oh god, that's insane. I would be puckered thinking that that's gonna
Yeah,
break.
well, I immediately cut everything off and retied everything because I was like, "There's no way I'm catching another one on there." But I was crossing my fingers and counting lucky stars on that one because yeah, I
Oh,
couldn't believe I actually got that thing in the boat.
no, and with my luck, and this is when you know it's like it's your time. Like that shit, I'd lose the big one, and then that breaks off, and then all of a
Um,
sudden my brain is dead. It's like
oh yeah,
this is not my day, like
yeah,
at all.
yeah. I went on after that, caught a bunch of small fish. When I say small, I'm talking like 12 to 14 inches. I was
Keepers though.
Yeah, keepers for sure. I caught keepers all day. I was fishing and I kept moving back into the creek. And this creek has a lot of timber in it. It's got a lot of like fallen trees and stuff that has floated down the creek from because it's one of the runoff creeks. So it changes week to week. If we get one of those big storms, the trees and the branches will move around back there. So it's actually a lot of fun fishing it because every week it could be different. But I'm moving around and I'm moving back and I'm catching small fish, 12 inches, 14 inches. And I finally get my limit probably 2 to 3 hours in the tournament.
Oh wow. Okay.
Um, After that, I am still catching. I'm moving out or moving in, still fishing because the tide's still coming in. And I'm fishing this area back there because there's resident fish back there. But once it gets to high tide, those fish are still underneath those bushes and they're feeding up underneath those bushes, but it becomes really, really hard to get a bait to them because the water's up in the actual bush itself at high tide. So they don't it's a little tougher for them to be able to see the bait that you're throwing in there. So my swim jig will get there, but it'll fall way out here and the fish is back in the bush up underneath here. You know what I'm saying?
How many swig like, how many rods are you usually using? Like, for at least this tournament, how many do you have rigged up? And do you have multiple of the same thing, like 2 or 3 swim jigs tied on?
No, I have one rod that I use for my swim jig. It is a Dobbin 734.
Okay.
It is it's a hell of a ride, and that thing is in my hands a lot of time. This tournament, I carry six. I have six bases on my crate, and I think if I can't catch them with six, that's all I'm not going to catch them that day. Um, for this tournament, I took two big swim bait rods, and I had
I like your style.
I had a glide bait tied on, and I had basically a big crankbait tied on. It's like a 6-inch crankbait. I did throw them. I did not catch any fish on them today, or on tournament day. But the swim jig, and then I had a crankbait rod that I had tied on, and I actually did catch a couple of fish on that one.
Hmm.
Um, Other than that, I had one spinning rod, and I had a wacky worm on there because if I can't catch them on a swim jig or something like that, then I'm just gonna throw a wacky worm. I don't.
Would you consider like, what got you into the big bait thing? Like, what got you into big swim baits, big line, big tackle?
Uh, I wanted to be different.
Hmm.
Everybody's throwing jigs and worms and crankbaits and all of that usual stuff that every angler goes out there when they start to learn how to fish. They throw that. So these fish see that over and over and over and over again. Not a lot of people. There's more people now because the swim bait thing is blowing up pretty big, but not a lot of people throw these big baits. I mean, especially you find a bait that works and fish for some reason are just attracted to it. They really do work. And I've caught fish that are the same size as my swim bait on the big swim baits. Those fish, I always say that the fish don't have a mirror, they don't know how big they are. So they just come out and they smack these things. And they've got treble hooks on them, most of them do. And they get hooked. As long as you got sharp hooks, they'll get hooked, and as long as your drag is set correctly, then you can get them in the boat.
Mhm. No, it really is, because more and more people are getting into it, but it's almost like the people that get into it dabble, but they don't transition it into actually a plan for a tournament. And so you see more and more people buying those or the big spoons or things like that, but they're not transitioning it to a tournament strategy, because I think that's like that's a commitment. And I know, my brother and I, when we did tournaments, team tournaments, it's one thing. It's way easier to say, like, yeah, one of you throw a mag draft, one of you throw a big thing, because if you hit payday, great. But when you're in a tournament and it's just you, it is like you got to make sure that you're dialed into that. And you look at guys like Carl Jochimson or Zaldane, these guys that throw it, it can be feast or famine. And it's really picking and choosing your battles with those things.
Oh, for sure. Most of the time I'm throwing like crankbait style swim baits. Here, I actually have. I'm throwing
Oh, yeah.
stuff like this.
Oh, okay. Like, yeah, wake bait type of deals almost.
Yeah, well, this is actually a diver. You see the bill angle?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it dives down a little bit, but yeah, it'll be like a wake bait style, and then this tail is just flopping all over the freaking place. Stuff like this. That's my go-to stuff is like the crankbait style. The glide baits work really well as well. But if they're not on a glide bait, they're not on a glide bait. If they are, then it's gonna be a good day because you're gonna catch some really really good fish.
Yeah.
But it's like anything else in fishing. Once you find that bait that they want,
Mhm.
almost every single fish in there is going to eat it.
And you're also right, guys. And I touched on this on one of my swim bait videos earlier. It's a window in time during the year for each type of bait, and like it's like the glide bait bite. Like there's a window in the spring. I know of one in the spring where if it's on, it is so much freaking fun. But if it's off, you're just you're wasting your time, and you got to know those windows.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure.
So, do you not like to use spinning tackle? Are you against it? The furry one crowd, because like some of these lakes that you fished were like they're insanely pressured, and you almost. I mean, one strategy is to drop down.
Yeah, I don't think I've caught a fish in a tournament on a spinning rod all year. I don't think I have. I'm trying to think of one where I have, and I think it's I really use that swim jig and a lot, and you can use it a lot of different ways. I can throw it out, I can let it sit, I can hop it, I can swim it. It's just so versatile that I think that's my kind of finesse bait. Not just not using a spinning reel. I don't know. Maybe I just don't like using them. I guess like you said, like for some reason I
I
don't
love
throw them a lot. I don't throw them a lot. I just don't.
uh, I love that your finesse is like, I'll finesse down to like 20-pound test. That's fine. Like that's my finesse.
Yeah.
So yeah, with this tournament in the bag, and did you know during the day that you had this wrapped up? When did you know, like, oh shit, this is
Not
a
at
thing
all.
that happened?
Actually, coming after the tide flipped, I my strategy was to move out to the holes where the fish move in because the fish well, at high tide the fish move up into the lily pads and they start to get. I mean, I struggle to catch them back in those lily pads. I know some guys can do it, but I really struggle to catch them back there. So I when the tide moves out and it starts to go from high tide to low tide, there's a certain window right there where those fish are sitting right at the edge of the lily pads, moving towards the deep holes, and we hit that window
Mm,
right at the end of the tournament. So I was sitting in second place when he cut the standings off, and they cut the standings off an hour before the end of the tournament. So I was sitting in second place, and I was probably an inch and a half. I think actually no, I think Mr. Coleman upgraded a little bit, so I think I was 3 inches behind him when he cut the standings off. So half an hour left in the tournament. I'm still fishing my swim jig. This now I'm moving out towards the mouth of the creek and I cast it over. Actually, I remember looking over at this little patch of lily pads that was at the mouth, and I said, "Yep, there's a fish right there." And I cast it over, and I hit my spot, and the jig fell down, and it took off to the right. And I set the hook on it, and it was the 16-inch fish, which was my biggest fish at the time. So that
dude.
half an hour left. Half an hour left. I hit a 16, gave me, I think it was an inch and a half upgrade at that time. So now I'm like, okay, all I need is one fish and I can catch up. I'll be right there on it. Fast forward to 10 minutes left in the tournament. Um, I had moved out a little bit to check a couple spots. I hadn't caught anything. So I came back to that same spot where I caught the 16. I cast out, let the jig fall down a little bit. This time I'm swimming it back and bam, there's the bite. Get it in the boat. It's a 16 and a quarter.
Mhm.
Now my biggest fish at the time. That's another inch and a half upgrade, basically, or some roundabout. So I'm in my head, I'm like, all right, I am right there with him if he hasn't upgraded. 5 minutes later, with 5 minutes left in the tournament, make another cast out and pretty close to the same spot, probably about 10 yards up the creek. I got another hit. 16 and three quarters this time.
Wow.
That moved me up a good inch and a half, 2 inches, and that those three fish won me the tournament in the last 30 minutes of the tournament, basically. So yeah, I fished hard all day, and
Mm.
that tide just lined up perfectly with that time frame right there. So those fish moved out to right there at that spot, and I was right there at that spot right at that perfect time.
Dude, that's freaking awesome. Again, when it's meant to be, when it's your time, it's your time. That's awesome.
Yeah, I was freaking out. That last fish, that 16 and three quarter, I got it I got it on the board and my hands doing. I had that adrenaline going through me. I was free because there's only 5 minutes left in the tournament and those they don't like to cooperate. You know, this fish don't like to cooperate. So
Mhm.
I mean I have a, a way of getting them to calm down. I take the fish off the hook and then I immediately put it on fish grips that are attached to a leash that are attached to my seat and I put the fish right back in the water.
Smart.
And I let it swim around and do its thing for a while. This time I couldn't screw around a lot. I couldn't let it have a lot of time out there. But while I'm getting my board out, get the board out, set it on the bottom of my kayak, get everything ready, get the phone ready, take the picture, and then I bring the fish back up and I take my pictures. It usually lets them calm down or tires them out a little bit more to where they will sit still for you.
Mhm.
Unless it's a smallmouth. They don't sit still at all.
No, they don't, and that's no, they don't. A smallmouth from a kayak is an ordeal. Guys, for you guys that are just title guys, you don't understand. And so I actually like I live on the Upper Potomac right now. I used to live next to Shenandoah. the fight doesn't end once you get them in the net.
Yeah.
It's not. It just begins, especially if you're in a tournament, you gotta get them on the board. It's an ordeal.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
almost like a snakehead. I actually caught a pretty big snakehead during this tournament, during this summer
seriously.
tournament. Yeah, I took a picture of it. I held it up above my head, and it's up here, and it's touching its tail is down in my lap. It was probably an 8 to 10 pounder.
What is your biggest snakehead ever?
Uh, I don't usually weigh my fish, but I put this snakehead. It was actually on a Potomac tournament. I think my second year fishing. It was one of those like middle summer tournaments where it was 100 degrees outside, and I caught this thing and I put it on my 30-inch catchboard, and its
Uh-huh.
tail was hanging over the catchboard and touching the water off the side of the boat.
Holy
I was
smokes.
standing up. I was standing up. I took this picture standing up, holding it above my head like this, and it was down past my waist. That's how freaking big this fish was.
That
It
thing's
had to be like a
big.
12-pound like snakehead, if I had to guess.
Dude, that's fun.
Yeah,
And they
that was a lot of fun. That was on the same swim jig rod, same swim jig, like my swim jig setup and everything. 15-pound test. Those things.
do you use
I
anything else
love
but a
fishing.
swim jig? My god, I love it. Just swim jigs 24/7. You are like John Cox in a kayak. I love it. So, like, going into this bad boy here, you got one tournament left. What are your thoughts going into the res? Res, guys, is code for Occoquan Reservoir, aka Fountainhead, Northern Virginia.
Um, I have fished the res a lot. I used to live about 10 minutes from it, and I would fish Bull Run Arena after work, basically for fun fishing. So I know that launch and the Occoquan Reservoir really well. I'm pretty confident. Last year, I think I finished in fifth place in the classic during that tournament. So I know I have a good amount of experience there. I need to get out there and do some fishing, do a little bit of free fishing. I don't like getting out there like the week or even a couple of weeks before the tournament because I don't want them to see what I'm doing right then. I feel especially like in the creek that I fish on Potomac, I left it alone for a good month before this tournament before
Mhm.
you know I didn't go out there fishing at all really. I went to a couple other spots on the Potomac so that I could kind of dial down what the fish were eating and where they were at, where they were, and how they were reacting. I mean, I know the Potomac pretty well, so I had an idea of what they would be doing and what they would be eating. But I don't like getting out there and pairing my fish up that I could catch tournament weekend, or just showing them the baits that I might be using.
Since you don't have a pedal or electronic motor, how does that change up the way you attack a body of water? Because it does affect the range in which you can cover in a day in a tournament or in pre-fishing.
Yeah, for sure. I cover a lot of water still. I do it. I think the Lake Anna tournament, I have a typical route that I like to take. I mean, depending on where the fish are, if I get on them in one spot in the school on Lake Anna, then I don't move.
Mm.
But usually Lake Anna, I'll cover like 8 miles tournament day.
Wow.
Yeah, I kayak a lot. I still cover water. Unlike I'm tired at the end of the day instead of the gun motor guys that get to sit there and look at their phone and surf the internet while they're motoring spot
Yeah.
from.
But so then what do you do about fish positioning? Is there any kind of tips for people at home that don't actually have either a pedal or electric motor? Like how do you line up your casts and things like that? Like because boat positioning is so important, whether it is a ranger boat or a kayak. Like what do you do when you let's say there's a bush, boom, there's a bush, there's a little bit of current. How do you set up for a cast?
You it's experience really. You have to know it when we're talking about the Potomac and the tide. It does depend on the current, which way it's flowing, because those fish will set up on the other like the different sides of that bush. They'll be on the downstream side, basically, whichever way the water is flowing. So yeah, you kind of have to know. And I like to when there's current involved, I like to throw up current and bring it back down with the current. That's usually the way I fish and the way I catch more fish. So I position myself accordingly. If I'm on the Doa, then I'll as I'm floating down, I'll swing back around, and if there's a spot over here, I'll move way around that spot and swing back around and come back up current so that I'm fishing up current, fishing to so that the bait, those fish that are looking up current, the bait's coming straight to them. That's what I try to do.
Gotcha, gotcha, gotcha. That's a good tip, guys, because I know for a lot of people that don't have the spot lock and things of that ilk, that's the one thing that they get frustrated with is like you're trying to paddle and then you're also trying to cast and position, and there's a lot more effort, and you should put that effort into lining up your cast to make sure that you're efficient with your time.
Yeah, you're gonna work harder for sure because that is it, to hold position in current, whether it's on the tidal Potomac or it's on the Dilla, it's it's tougher because you're fighting the current the entire time. You don't have that trolling motor just doing all that work for you. But my left arm is really strong because I got the rod in my right hand and I'm casting, but I'm taking that paddle like this with my left arm, and I'll hold position doing that. It's on the tidal Potomac because the
You should
tide
do some
it
bodybuilder
moves,
competitions. Good
it
lord.
moves, but it doesn't move that fast. So
Uh-huh.
I'm able to hold position pretty well with my left arm.
Oh my god, dude. Good. Your lats got to be just jacked. My god. So, like, do you have any plans of like ever upgrading to getting like, I mean, a pedal or some kind of electronic motor? Because I don't think it's working for you the way it is.
I've thought about it. If I were to do it, I would get an electronic motor and probably just use it to get spot to spot. To tell you the truth,
Hmm.
I mean, I'm pretty good at. I've gotten positioning down. I know how to do it at this point. It's just when I want to move, a half a mile to a new spot, doing that in a paddle you are the only motor that tires you out, and or just that takeoff early in the morning when everyone's trying to get to their spot. Everyone beats me there because obviously I'm paddling. I can get 3 to 4 miles per hour in my doing it, but I'm tired when I get there. And the motor guys, they get there and they're nice and relaxed and they're ready to go. I'm I'm sitting there breathing hard because I had to work really hard to get to my spot.
Yeah, it's just crazy how much you can pimp out kayaks nowadays. It's absolutely insane. And you probably saw a lot of pimped out kayaks when we went to the national championship.
Oh yeah, yeah. There are guys that spend a lot of money on their kayaks. They
What was that experience like?
It's a lot of fun. Big tournaments like that. I've been twice to two separate national championships now. The first time I went to Shreveport, Louisiana, and I fished Lake Caddo down there. And there's a lot of fish down there. There's a lot of big fish down there, and it is very grassy, much like the Potomac.
Hmm.
We were there in the spring for that tournament. That was when the national championship was during the spring. They've now switched it to where the national championship was in the fall, but back then it was during the spring, and it was fun. It was my first time just going somewhere else to fish. Like I said, I'm still kind of new. I've only fished Virginia waters up until I went to Shreveport, and just going and learning a new body of water and experiencing the fishing down in a different state in general was a lot of fun. I didn't do very well in the tournament. I I did not catch a limit on the first day, which kind of took all the pressure off me because then I just got the fun fish the rest of the time. I
Hmm.
didn't really have a chance to win or anything. So I had a lot. I mean, I still had a lot of fun. But going into the second one, I was a little more. I had a little more expectations going into the second one. The second one was in Gunnersville.
Oh wow.
Um, so I went to Lake Gunnersville and I went down there for a full week and I pre-fished and I got on some fish. I wasn't on the right size fish. I uh I caught limits each day, basically. So I limited out, which is always a goal for me. Like I said before, I want to catch a limit in the tournament. That's the whole. You can't win a tournament unless you catch 5 fish.
Yeah.
Um, but they weren't the right size. I mean, it's a national championship. You've got guys that do this for a living that are down there fishing to try to win that tournament. So they I think I finished right outside of the top 100, which the top 100 in the KBF national championship, they get to fish on the third day. So it's a 3-day tournament. First
Wow.
2 days, first 2 days, well, you have to finish in the top 100 to even qualify to fish the third day to have a chance to win. I finished right outside the top 100, I believe. and I didn't get to fish the third day, so I just went out fun fishing on the third day.
But it's still a great learning experience. You get to see the country, which is so cool.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Alabama was cool going down to Gunnersville. It's good people, and then Shreveport was a lot of fun going down there. Louisiana, you got eating crawfish and like gator sausages and stuff like
So
that.
cool.
It's a whole different world down there.
You got to fish in these 2 national championships, 2 lakes that are probably known for their grass fishing.
Uh huh.
Then in our river, you decided to fish wood. Like why when so many people you either look like a genius or a madman because everybody usually wants to fish grass on the Potomac. Generally speaking, what made you want to fish wood?
Um, the creek where I fish, it is very shallow getting into that creek. So there are no bass boats back there. Dude, I've been back there hundreds of times because I love fishing this place, and I've seen one bass boat. And when I saw that guy, I was like, "You better get the hell out of here because if you're not out of here when this tide starts moving out, you're going to be back here until the tide comes back in." And he's like, "Yeah, I know. I need to go right now." Basically, at that time. So, yeah, they don't see a lot of pressure back there, other than like bank anglers and guys like me. That it's pretty special back in this little spot that I like to fish.
So would you say it's more of like it's an area and no pressure versus like a specific cover type of the reason that you made your choice?
Um, yeah, I would think it's area there.
Okay.
When you get out to, I mean, I do catch them out there in the grass and the lily pads, like those couple fish at the end of the tournament. But you still need to know that. I mean, the same thing goes with the tide. They move around. You still need to know where they're going to position according to the tide. You got to be there at that right time.
What is your favorite tide to fish?
Outgoing, for sure.
Outgoing?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I've learned how to catch them on an incoming because we fish there a lot. I mean, I fish there a lot at least, and we've had a couple tournaments each year there as the club. So you got to catch them on an incoming tide sometimes. So you got to
Mhm.
learn how to do it. But yeah, my outgoing tide, those fish are coming out. They're posted up on the drop offs right outside the lily pads and the grass and the cover, and they're feeding because all of those bait fish are coming out of those lily pads as well.
What do you think of the state of the river right now? Just you're on it a lot. Do you think it's fishing good? Do you think like it's just in a weird lull? What's your vibe on it?
I I'm a little biased because obviously I caught 20 fish during this tournament and other guys were struggling to catch one. So when I go out there, I usually catch quite a few fish. So I think it's in a great state. I know other guys struggle in other creeks, and I when I went out pre-fishing in another creek, I actually did struggle the week beforehand. I uh I did not do well. I think I only caught two or three. So it was tough. That was right after. I think we had just had a cold front before that weekend, so I think the fish were a little screwed up, but it was a struggle. I don't have a lot of experience over in those other creeks though, so I can't really say exactly that the fishing was just worse or if I was just worse.
Would you consider the Potomac your home body of water, or what would you consider your home body
Right now, for where I live, yeah, I fish the Potomac the most.
the most?
Other than that, it would be the Aquana Reservoir because I've lived close to that a lot of the time. So especially all of not last year, but the year before, I fished that almost a couple of like two or three times a week. I would be out there on the res.
Wow.
So I learned a lot about the res when I was doing that, which is going to probably hopefully help me in this next tournament.
What are the 3 places that you would like to fish in your lifetime?
Ooh, three places I would like to fish.
Or you could just give 1.
I want to get down to Florida, somewhere down in Florida.
Ooh,
I
that's a good
really
one.
want to get down there. Swim bait guys talk about California a lot, and I want to hit the uh, the Delta in California. It looks like the Potomac River, but
Mhm.
they got 10 pounders swimming around in those creeks. So,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So I look at the Delta in California and I say, yeah, that could be a lot of fun. Especially they've got a lot of striper out there. I watch some videos from Greg Blanchard out there, and he's a kayak guy and he fishes tournaments and he fishes the Delta a lot. So
I
I
wanna fish Havasu, like, just the idea of fishing near cactus in a desert, like something
Yeah,
like that would be kind of neat too.
yeah. I'm probably going to Kentucky Lake. I'm pretty sure I'm going to Kentucky Lake for this national championship coming up here in October this year. So that'll be another spot I get to see and learn and hopefully catch fish.
Have you ever been there before? Like, what's your
No,
vibe on that tournament?
never been there. I'm started to look at it to research it a little bit. I'm going there with a handful of guys from NVKBA and from Virginia that are staying all at the same house. So
Nice.
I'm looking at where we're staying, and then I'm looking at places, starting to look at places and do a little research on the lake itself, so that I can have some kind of idea what I want to do when I get there.
Hmm. No, right on. And hopefully, guys, I'm going to be trying to help out with the championship interview process, the media stuff, and then hopefully I can actually reach out to you guys then too, just to see how that's going for the old Virginia and Northern Virginia boys. Dude, thank you so much for coming on. Is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you'd like to talk about? Is there anything at all?
No, I can't really think of anything. Um, Trying not to give too much away.
Yeah, and that's the hardest thing. When you're starting this and you haven't been doing a lot of interviews, it's really hard to figure out like how much you actually give away. How to be. What's the etiquette? Because this is one thing. Again, I go back to my high school English. They don't teach you about the etiquette side of it. Like when you do get when you hit it big and you become famous, it's like you have to have that kind of polished etiquette, and it's hard because no one teaches it.
Yeah, most guys that know me know that I share. I usually, if it's just me and you talking, just sitting there, I'll tell you basically. I try not to give certain spots away, but I mean, if I'm catching them on a swim jig, I'll tell you I'm catching them on a swim jig. If I'm catching them on my big swim baits, then I'm gonna brag about it a little bit because you aren't throwing those.
This is the only two things you ever throw. So it's
Pretty much.
well, John, yeah, thank you so much for coming on, guys. Please, hey, follow him on Facebook. Please follow this guy. Good luck in the championship here at the Res coming up. He's high in the points, guys, and this could be the year that he actually brings back the AOA. Again, guys, please like and subscribe to the channel down below for all news and coverage around the greater Fishing DMV area. We're the fastest growing radio fishing show in the greater metropolitan area. We'll see you next time on Fishing the DMV. Bye.
You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your hosts, Thomas Ahrens and Jared Mounts. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester, Virginia.
If that doesn't get you jacked up, I don't know what will.